Well, hello and welcome to Straight Talk Ventura from the American Legacy Studios. I'm Tom Spence from News Talk 1590 KVTA. I've been doing radio in this market for, since 1979. With me is Stephen Gama.
How you
Hello,
doing?
Stephen.
Good
Doing
morning.
great.
Good morning. Sunday.
Introduce yourself, Stephen.
I'm Stephen Gama. I'm resident of Port Hueneme. Interested in making things better and having a good conversation.
And today's conversation is going to involve the COVID shutdowns and how it affected local business, especially with Matt Brimijan coming in. And Matt Brimijan is the owner of Mrs. Olsens Coffee.
Correct.
And you've had a long-term experience with him, chatting with him, and
Yes.
seeing what he has gone through over the now getting up to 2 years of COVID restrictions. We will also have attorney Rhonda Baldwin Kennedy in, who is representing Brave and Mrs. Olsens and some other folks.
Right. Yeah, and it's not just Matt's story, it's many other people's story, and it breaks down into the employees of his restaurant. Now it's affecting employees of a hospital. Who would have thought, a year ago when we had all the healthcare workers being championed as the heroes they are, now some of them are on the other end of the mandates and the regulations where they could have negative repercussions.
Certainly, the way this just vibrates out, it does affect everyone. It even affects us as people in the community. When you just want to go out and enjoy maybe a nice evening at a movie, enjoy a nice dinner, a nice breakfast somewhere. Yeah. So this has covered all parts of the population, but the people who were really under the gun, so to speak, were the business owners who were, many heavy fines were levied against them. And we want to have a conversation here where we find out, where is the truth and where is this right? Where is the government overreaching? And where is the businessman? Where does he or she have the right to maintain their business and their livelihood?
And then just having the courage to want to talk about it could also even generate some people to get a little excited and vitriolic for some reason. It's really strange.
Yeah, this has gotten people very, very angry, and it's divided people. Last night, for example, I was at a hockey game with my son. My son was playing hockey.
All right.
And in the stands, I would say 10% of the people were wearing masks,
yes.
And it is an indoor rink, obviously, in Southern California. And what you're saying is exactly true. Even at large gathering events, if anybody watched the Dodgers and the Braves,
I watched it.
So we're going to deal with it. We're going to deal with a different Brave organization,
yeah.
One we really like. The Atlanta Braves maybe not so much, but looking at these baseball games, very dense crowds together, even though they are outdoors.
Yeah.
Very few people wearing masks. So we are dealing with something that's hard to follow as far as what are we supposed to do. And one of the issues that we're going to cover here also, you talked about employees earlier, Stephen, and I think this is one of the main things that we have going on that's really troubling. When you look at a kid, and there are many adults, older folks who also do these jobs, but like bag boys, people working the counters at a fast food restaurant. We'll get into the in and out situation in just a little bit.
Yes.
When did their job also become ID checker, bouncer?
Yeah, it shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be. And I was at a football game Friday night, Hueneme High School, and it was packed, and nobody was wearing a mask. We're outside. And again, if you're in the most affected age range, and you're above 70 years old, you certainly have to be more protective than if you're a kid attending high school. But again, it's really hard to make sense out of all of it as we move through our lives.
That's an excellent point, because one of the things we're going to go over, at least I would like to address, is some of the statistics that we have here with people who have unfortunately passed due to COVID-19 with age and comorbidity and the like.
Word.
Yeah, it sure is. When you're dealing with, by my count, and these are numbers that I received, number of coronavirus disease 2019 COVID-19 deaths in the U.S. as of October 20th, 2021 by age. And if you go all the way up to the age of 49 years, you have 45,000. After that, you get into some radically higher numbers.
Right.
So one of the issues that I think many of us have been concerned about is, why are we all being treated the same way? Why is everybody being put into the same box? And I think that's a little bit of a difficult thing for many people to get their arms around. If you feel healthy, robust, and if you also feel that you have taken proper precautions for yourself, and you're
Right.
also going to stay
Right.
away from anybody
Yeah.
that you could infect with coronavirus, why shouldn't you be allowed to roam about the county as you feel safe? And we'll try
Right.
to cover all of these subjects on today's Straight Talk Ventura, once again from the American Legacy Studios. I'd also like to thank the man behind this possible, and that's Bruce Whitey. He's our
Yeah, he's over
director,
there.
producer, organizer, and man currently operating the cameras at this point. So let's do it.
Chill is superpower.
California and the world opens back up from COVID-19 quarantines, lockdowns, closures, or whatever the hell just happened. There's no doubt that perhaps the biggest casualty of saving lives has been the destroyed livelihoods and perhaps lives lost for small business owners and employees in America.
Recently, Forbes reported nearly 100,000 establishments that temporarily shut down due to the pandemic are now out of business. Wall Street Journal reported COVID-19's toll on U.S. businesses, 200,000 extra closures in the pandemic's first year. And CBS News reported 9 million U.S. small businesses fear they won't survive the pandemic.
But perhaps one of the biggest questions raised, and still yet to be answered by this crisis, has implications that could change the entire future balance of freedom and civil liberties in the U.S. and the world. It's the question of whether citizens should be subservient to the best judgment, or maybe whims, of bureaucrats and politicians, or whether your government is ultimately an instrument of and compliant to the electorate's will. And when it comes to enforcement actions, we're seeing the entire globe is testing the limits of what power does government actually yield to cancel civil liberties, partially or even utterly, in any kind of emergency, let alone a health alert that may have a whole lot of debatable circumstances. Now, you may not know that proposition is being put to a major test right now and right here in Ventura County. And by the looks of it, the implications of what happens in Ventura County today could well foretell the future of civil liberties for all of America in the face of the next proclaimed health crisis, which many say is sure to come, if not already planned. At the heart of the controversy in Ventura County lies Mrs. Olsens' Coffee Hut. Mrs. Olsens is an Oxnard local favorite for breakfast and lunch, located at the Channel Islands Harbor, just 1 block from the beach. The restaurant was founded in 1974 by Corinne Olsen, who named it for her mother, Helen. In 2001, it was bought by Tom Brimajon. Brimajon, a former Los Angeles police officer who served in the Marine Corps after 9/11, used to play a recording of God Bless America at midday Sundays when he was on the premises. Mrs. Olsens grew to a larger premises and enjoyed initial success and local notoriety. Esquire magazine voted it a top breakfast spot. But by 2017, the Brimajons were getting older. And after suffering some health problems, Tom and his wife had taken out just about all the mortgage loans they could and were at risk of losing it all if they couldn't get some young energy to help take things over. That's when they asked for their son, Matt, to move to Oxnard from the East Coast and take the baton managing the restaurant to keep it afloat. For the next 3 years, Matt Brimajon kept the show on the road, enough to keep the family business open and popular with the locals. Then COVID hit, and Governor Gavin Newsom ordered all restaurants shut down, along with gyms, salons, and thousands of other family businesses, except of course dining rooms needed for meetings with his cronies, or salons for elite congresswomen that were in need of a fast styling. But some Ventura County businesses wouldn't comply, and Mrs. Olsens was out front. After initially agreeing to close for 60 days and using that time to remodel his establishment, Matt Brimajon decided the family business couldn't take any more red, and he reopened Mrs. Olsens in defiance of county health mandates directed by Robert B. Levin, Ventura County Public Health Officer. It wasn't long before Ventura County started upping the ante and levied almost $500,000 in fines on Mrs. Olsens and similarly other establishments who couldn't get in line. Brimijan remained defiant and still kept his doors open. And as he told me in a recent interview at Mrs. Olsens,
the charges that they put against me, those have been dropped. The eviction, they also tried to evict me because my restaurant sits on county, they own the ground rent, and then the leasing company leases from the county, and then I have my contract with the leasing company. Well, the county forced the management company to evict me, you know.
they really went to war with you on this.
Oh, 100%. Oh yeah, every day, you know, and you know, I had to stay here, you know, nonstop because I never knew who was coming to my door. I didn't know if they're, you know, what days I had to be in court. You know, every day there was kids coming after me nonstop.
On December 22nd of 2020, Mrs. Olsens Coffee Hut lost their restaurant license. And while none of the restaurant's neighbors at Channel Islands Harbors were serving diners on site, Brimijan decided to continue serving indoors and out. But by January, the County Board of Supervisors had had about enough. Dr. Robert Levin filed 18 lawsuits against several restaurants and gyms in Ventura County aimed at shutting many of them down altogether. By contrast, neighboring Santa Barbara and San Luis Obispo counties had not had any similarly broad crackdowns as of January. In walks Rhonda Baldwin Kennedy. Rhonda Baldwin Kennedy is a litigation attorney in the 26th Congressional District in Ventura County who ran for Congress in 2020 against Julia Bromley. She lost, but that's a whole other story. And regardless, Baldwin Kennedy is sure to be back in the race in 2022. But in 2020, Kennedy got a call from one of her campaign supporters, John Franco, about fines and mandates that were damaging his business, Coliseum Boot Camp in Oxnard. Kennedy took the case on and pursued what she believes was a pivotal discovery strategy to play the county's hand. She moved to depose Health Director Robert Levin and ask him under oath what the specific statistics and data were that he has access to in order to declare such drastic mandates as to close businesses down without compensation. Kennedy claims that it was at that very point in time that Ventura County started dropping the fines and dropping the lawsuits against its small business that were under the gun. Now, we'll ask Ms. Baldwin Kennedy more about the details of all this live later in the show. But as it was, more and more businesses started to reach out to Baldwin Kennedy and ask for her help getting relief from the mandates and fines. That included Matt Brimijan. But here's the next twist of this story, and it's really become the future of the story, even as the legal cases finally simmer down or come to some sort of resolution.
And we'll have more coming up with that interview with Bruce Whitey. We'll also have Matt Brimijan from Mrs. Olsens Coffee joining us in just a moment here.
Yes.
Stephen Gama to my right, and I'm Tom Spence with News Talk 1590 KVTA. Stephen, you are the mayor of Port Hueneme.
Yes.
I would like to get into just a couple of the
essentials
group meeting ideas that we have here. As I said earlier, Ventura County Supervisor Matt Levere is on air with us every Wednesday morning on KVTA, and he's open to all questions that we put to him.
Yes.
One of the questions we ask every week is, when are we going to be back to having meetings where people are actually in chambers?
Right.
Port Hueneme, what evening do you have your meetings?
We have our meetings on Mondays every 2 weeks, and we were in chambers and we were complying, wearing masks, which, you know, we could do it. It's uncomfortable. It's not the best, but I felt that that's where we needed to be, and the public had come in and they take their temperature, they wear a mask. However, we recently went back to Zoom, and just as an abundance of caution. And the one thing that I understand is, like, if an elderly person wants to participate in a meeting, they need to take precautions because they're in that risk group that, you know, what is it, 95% of the deaths are in people over the age of 70, I believe, or 80. But so that's the one area where I understand, like, we need to be able to accommodate the high risk group. And Zoom, well, it's not perfect. It does, but it takes us out of public meetings. And then for me, the controversy for me is like, well, we go to the supermarket, we go to all these other venues where there's people interacting, and that appears to be okay, but for a public meeting, it's not.
And that, I think that's part of the problem that we have. Initially in Newbury Park, the church that was not allowed to have services, and they decided to have services anyway, were really under fire. And then you would go to Home Depot and be shoulder to shoulder with people. And so there are some things that are very inconsistent in this. And that's some of the things we can cover, and probably most accurately, at least from a legal standpoint, we will get information from attorney Rhonda Baldwin Kennedy.
And, and on that point, lost in all this, now the focus is wear a mask, mask mandate. But washing your hands frequently with soap and water, the CDC has long said that is the best way to prevent the spread of disease. And it seems like we've lost that message in exchange of wear your mask. And that kind of concerns me a bit, because it is very, very true. Washing your hands frequently with soap and water is the best way to prevent the spread of disease. So
Mom told me to do that. She never told me to wear a mask, nor did she tell me to stay 6 feet away from someone.
Right.
But obviously this COVID-19 has been a lot more fierce than what we would have under regular circumstances. And this is part of the problem and the issue that we've had over about 2 years now of businesses being some ruined, others really, crippled. And then, oddly enough, some of the businesses actually have prospered during COVID-19. I was just looking for some notes. And again, you want to go down a rabbit hole, just type in mask mandates or businesses, and you will find one opinion after another. And a lot of these opinions are from well-noted sources and trusted sources. For example, if you look at the pizza industry, according to Bloomberg Intelligence, last year's Domino's captured 19% of the total pizza sales. The company had a whopping 36% of U.S. delivery sales, and their profits went up from $2.19 to $2.99 on a share. And they also gathered a huge percentage, a 30% increase over the previous year, because that's what was benefited. So if you couldn't go out to a restaurant like Mrs. Olsens, what did you do? You rang up your pizza guy. So again, one business totally prospers and another business is injured. As Matt Bremmerjohn said in one of his quotes that I was reading, breakfast traditionally is not a takeout item. And people say, what about McDonald's? A different category. Obviously, ordering breakfast through your window and then going off to work is different than going to a nice restaurant like Mrs. Olsens, which we also know was regarded very highly by Esquire magazine. So the businesses that were in a position to deliver, literally, like pizza, or a business like a McDonald's, really got through this in some ways even more whole than they were before. It's the businesses that got affected, very, very severely. If you look at gyms, that was another one, and there was a couple of gyms in this county alone that were under fire because they decided to stay open, and they decided to keep performing workouts and allowing their clients, customers, and members to come into their gyms.
And we had a restaurant in Hueneme called Faux Saigon, and they just shut the doors for like 8 or 9 months, and they came back, which was welcomed. But I was wondering, like, are they ever going to be able to come back? And they did come back. But shutting a business down that you're paying rent on for 8 months, I mean, that's a big deal.
How come he gets music and I don't? I don't understand. And that is a great point. Now, Matt Bremmerjohn, again, to show you that he's a good, hardworking businessman, when they shut him down for 60 days, he used that opportunity to reinvent his business.
He did a wonderful
smart
job.
And that was smart. So, but then 60 days goes by, and it's like, okay, I'm ready. I would like to make some money now. And then he couldn't. So the main conversation that I would like to have once we get Matt on, and also Rhonda Baldwin Kennedy, is to talk about how this county went after businesses and what happened perhaps in Santa Barbara counties and San Luis Obispo, to see if the type of punishment fines levied were consistent throughout the many counties that we have here in California. Because Ventura County did come in fairly fierce on what they did to try to stop these folks from conducting business.
Right. Essential was the word, right? I mean, Home Depot was essential. Cannabis dispensaries were essential. Liquor stores were essential. Grocery stores were essential, but a restaurant serving nutrition isn't.
It's essential when you own it. I will tell you
Yeah.
that. It's essential when you use it to feed your family.
Right.
And that's the way you make your business. Now, the other questions we can ask both Matt and Rhonda are, was there compensation? So we can say for the businesses that did have to shut down, what monies were offered to them? We know many people who were employed who got taken out of work actually made more money in many cases. And yes, I do know people who literally made more money
Yep.
by not working than they did working.
Yeah.
What type of assistance was given to business, and was it enough to keep them whole and to keep them surviving through COVID-19? To speak on Dr. Levin for a moment, if I may, my previous experience with Dr. Levin is actually rather extensive. For many years on News Talk 1590 KVTA, we did the seasonal flu shot, and Dr. Levin would come in with his staff, and he would literally give me the jab, which was the regular flu. And I received that from him. So I have a personal relationship with Dr. Levin that is professional, not personal. But it was extensive over
Right.
the years many times. And I will say my experience with Dr. Robert Levin is he was always a good, well-intended person from what I could see.
Right.
COVID-19 has obviously changed the opinion.
Businesses representing American values and enterprise. The website proclaims, Brave is a grassroots group that formed in January 2021. Finally, this grassroots group of business
Are we off
owners,
mic?
customers, and supporters said, enough. We have a right to make a living. We have a right to do business. And Brave was born. The group seems to have legs. Their meeting often boasts 200 plus attendants and some rock star rebel speakers, such as Pastor Rob McCoy of the Godspeak Calvary Chapel in Thousand Oaks, who publicly waged his own battles with authorities over keeping his church's prayer service. And now perhaps because Brave is now organizing recall petitions of select members of the Ventura County Board of Supervisors, their meetings have even recently drawn attendance from County Supervisor Matt Levere, who braved his own chance to talk to a group that had previously been agitating to have him recalled. Perhaps due to the rapidly growing muscle of Brave, or perhaps to just make things right, in late spring, Supervisor Matt Levere reached out to Matt Brimijon, and they spent hours in meetings at Mrs. Olsens to attempt to square differences and diffuse the mounting hostilities.
And this was a matter of putting food on the table for their kids, for their employees' kids, and that they wanted to defy those orders. And I get that. I have two little kids. I know the pressures that I feel to put food on the table for my kids. But on the other side, I was hearing from a lot of business owners who felt the opposite. They wanted to comply with the orders. They were that concerned with the public health situation on the ground at that time, which was dire. And we can disagree on that. You may have different feelings. I agree. At that time, in my view, it was a dire situation, especially in our healthcare system. And they were coming to me saying, Matt, we're doing the right thing. We're closing down. And what are you going to do to support us? We are losing customers and clients to businesses that are staying open. We're never going to get those customers and clients back. You are creating... Ever. I'm just telling you what I heard.
So what have we learned today about authority and freedom in Ventura County that we didn't know a year ago?
At the end of the day, the government works for us. We don't work for the government. And people get that flipped. You know, they think that the government is in control, where they're not. They're not in control. We elect those people to go there, right? So we can hold them accountable for their decisions. And just it seems for so long, nobody's held them accountable for their decisions.
It's going to show that, you know, we're a republic and the people truly do hold the power. And I think that, you know, local government, state government, and even federal government will start listening to the people and realize that we just can't say, oh, yeah, we're all shutting down. You know, you don't have a say. We're going to take your businesses. without just compensation. And, I think they're going to think twice and before they do another closure. I think they're going to realize that, in Ventura County, we're not going to just sit around and take it. We're going to fight back, whether, we hold our rallies, we do our protests, but also we're also going to be taking it to the courtrooms.
A month ago, all they wanted to do was just do everything they could to bury me, and now they just all want to let it go.
As soon as I could, I voted to dismiss those lawsuits. As soon as I could, I voted to have the business licenses reinstated for the businesses.
Whatever the outcomes may be of this historical test of authority in Ventura County and the world, one thing might be said for certain. We sure live in interesting times. For Straight Talk Ventura, this is Bruce Whitey reporting.
Straight Talk Ventura.
And we are here in the American Legacy Studios. It is Straight Talk Ventura. I'm Tom Spence, and this is Stephen Gama, and I do believe we have our guest now. Hi, Rhonda. How are you? What would be the outcome that we're looking for here? Certainly, we want Matt's restaurant, all other businesses that were closed down, like gyms, and we know what the list of those businesses are. The end game here, apparently all of the fines that were levied have been removed. Is that a fact?
That's correct. Yeah, no fines. Factually, there were no that were imposed on my clients. So they didn't get fined. The cases were just dismissed with prejudice.
Are we dealing with a class action suit here where we're going to gather numerous restaurants and businesses together? Are these going to be individual efforts to be made well again with the county? What is our process here, Rhonda?
Our process is to make sure that this never happens again to another business. And that the government understands that they are limited on their powers over the citizens, that we control them. They work for us. So we are encouraging through Brave, great organization that started off, with just a few business and now is tremendously grown, with that power and with Matt's leadership, the political influence to remind these politicians that if you do not support your citizens and the business county, you will be replaced with candidates and elected officials that understand and respect the Constitution. So that I think should be the main goal, is to ensuring that this does not happen again, and to ensure that we have the right elected officials to protect our individual and constitutional rights if the county ever thinks about doing another closure order, or the state ever thinks about doing a closure order. Because quite frankly, the county could have stood up to the state and Gavin Newsom when they came for them. Other counties did, but Ventura County folded like a cheap suit.
Well, this is Rhonda Baldwin Kennedy. Rhonda, I would also like to ask, we just heard of In-N-Out, the In-N-Out, very famous In-N-Out Burgers, obviously the restaurant in San Francisco, and they made a stance against their employees speaking on vaccinations from their employees checking. It's interesting that the flexibility that a large restaurant chain like In-N-Out, the power that they would have just through the power of the dollar and their might in the business, what they're able to do, and what somebody like you has to do to represent Matt Brimajon. Now, obviously, Matt is a very intelligent guy.
Yeah, it's interesting how one restaurant could take a stand like In-N-Out is doing. It's kind of interesting considering the times when healthcare workers, firefighters are essentially might lose their jobs.
Well, yeah. Well, we see what happened with the airlines. The airlines tried that, and there were thousands of flights across the country that were canceled because pilots said, "I'm not going to fly. You know what? I'm calling in sick today." And when businesses start losing money and customers, that's when they kind of wake up, because they have to answer to their shareholders. And I've said this before. I had the plan for Facebook and Twitter. when they first started censoring, it's like these are publicly traded companies. So they have a duty to their shareholders, not a duty to their own personal political opinions. So you can't use a publicly traded company as your own personal political soundboard. So, when Twitter and Facebook started censoring people, their shares dropped. When President Trump sued them, their shares dropped. So anybody that owns Facebook shares, I own Facebook shares, you can sue Facebook for derivative action. And any airline that's publicly traded, their shareholders too can sue them on a shareholders derivative action for devaluing their shares, because there's no violating people's constitutional rights. Voluntarily doing this is not, it does not protect you from liability, from civil liability. So I think when lawsuits start being filed, when people stop showing up to work, like nurses and doctors, it's like, don't go to work. What are they going to do? We need healthcare providers. These are essential workers, but sometimes we gotta take a stand. And if they have a shortage of doctors, a shortage of police officers, there's the blue flu. They want to enforce it, have a red flu. I think they'll start listening at that point.
Yeah, that's really interesting because there is private enterprises versus government-run enterprises versus private healthcare centers. And there's a convergence of all these mandates and rules, and people just don't know which way to go. And it's almost appearing to get into the crisis mode. There's a potential for it, at least. And so it's going to be a tough few months as this stuff gets worked out. But it appears that the pandemic itself is waning in its ugliness. At least it appears to be going away, and I hope it is. But looking forward, is our country going to be fundamentally changed for the good or for the worse? And I think right now it kind of looks like some of the changes are more negative than positive.
All right. Does that wrap it up for this afternoon, Bruce?
Well, let's thank Rhonda for showing up.
Rhonda, awesome.
Let's thank Matt for trying to show up really hard, dealing with our sound problems.
Yeah,
he was in a mobile studio.
I think he was at Miss Olsens, and I know it's notoriously in and out of service there. Whenever I'm there,
is that right?
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough.
Too bad you're not the mayor of Oxnard.
Well, they're an unincorporated area, and that area used to belong to the city of Port Hueneme when the Bard family owned it, but they donated that property to the county so that they could build the harbor and the sand trap to benefit Hueneme Beach. So there you go. Well, we had a good time. I did.
Mayor,
we are going to try and improve and get better, but it seems like we have a potential here.
Rhonda had something to say.
Yes, Rhonda.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, Mayor, I have not met anyone who knows so much history about the county. You are a wealth of information. You should teach maybe a Saturday class at Mrs. Olsen so we can bring the kids and the kids can learn about the history of Ventura County.
Thank you very much. So what do you say, Tom?
I say it's our first go at Straight Talk Ventura from the American Legacy Studios with Stephen Gama, Mayor of Port Hueneme, and me, Tom Spence, from News Talk 1590 KVTA, and the man behind the scenes, Bruce Whitey. We will be back again soon.
Yes, hopefully. How's your blood pressure back there, Bruce? You doing okay?
I've died.
No, you did good. This is a tough thing to pull off with a one-man show, and I'm impressed. And yeah, we'll just keep trying to get better, right?
That's right. That's what we're going to do. So once again, thank you for joining us with Straight Talk Ventura. For Stephen Gama, Mayor of Port Hueneme, Tom Spence, and Bruce Whitey, we thank you very much for viewing this broadcast.